Hello everyone, this is Paige Stichler and this is my review on the root beer game simulation. So some of the challenges that I faced when playing the game is, we had no communication with any of the supply chain. So I was the factory, so all I knew is what orders I was receiving. I couldn't communicate with, the retailer, wholesaler, customer, anything like that. Another part of the communication is, you're going to talk to your suppliers and vendors, but there's also stuff that always goes on in the news or, historical things that happen that would also give you some idea of to some changes, when Christmas is coming, producers of, wrapping paper, they know they're going to have a spike in demand, or when they see some regulation coming that's going to outlaw, gasoline, or, you're going to have electric cars, those sort of things in the news, um, you can pay attention to so that you kind of have some idea of some changes that might be coming. I know, for our root beer game, we weren't going to have some news or historical events happening, but I experienced, pretty level demand and then huge spikes, and I had no real idea as to what was causing that. I find out later what causes that, but at the time, it could have been the factory, had a fire and had to shut down, or a news article came out that said root beer is now like the unhealthiest thing ever and people aren't drinking it anymore. I had no information. I just saw a huge change in my demand and not really any way to explain it. Um, Another challenge was just limited time. So it was hard to really come up with a good plan to factor, what I should order, and then as the demand changed, how I was forecasting or trying to guess what to order. Once it changed, that process obviously wasn't working for me anymore, but I didn't really have time to recalibrate what I needed to do differently. And then I also faced some, at the time it seemed like really unrealistic demand that I don't think you would normally see in a product like this. So at the time in the game, it was very confusing and challenging to try and figure out why that would be happening. Um, so this is a chart showing my inventory and orders received. So you can see the orange line is the orders received, and I was the factory. So it was saying that they needed 50,000 cases a week for several weeks. And then all of a sudden it doubled, tripled, almost quadrupled up to here. And then it quickly slowed back down and then was zero for several weeks. Um, so my inventory is this blue line. So I was holding a little bit of extra, doing okay. And then when the order spiked, I did try to order a little bit more, but it feels like no matter how much more I ordered, it was still never enough. So I got pretty far in the hole, and I was like, okay, I'm not getting out of the hole. Let me just order a bunch more to get out of the backlog. And by the time that big order came in, then all the rest of the orders dropped out and I didn't need any more. So then I just accumulated all this inventory and it just kind of sat there and I never really got to get rid of it. So I think some of the causes for this we talked about in the Zoom call. It essentially was the bullwhip effect. Um, there was a slight spike with the customer for they went from 50,000 to 100,000. So it was pretty stable. It jumped up a little bit and stayed stable, but when we did the calculations and the math, when when one group needs a little bit extra, then the next group's like, oh, they're ordering extra, let me order even more extra, and it just kind of um, amplifies at every level until you get so far away from what the original customer demand was. And then, I was the factory, so I was kind of the end of the line, and it ended up saying I needed so much, and then I needed nothing because now that those orders were fulfilled. So I accumulated quite a bit of inventory. I was trying to do forecast sheets and say, okay, they wanted 50, 50, 50. What would this forecast sheet, what would it predict would next week be? And based on those numbers, it was saying, okay, 50, 50, 50, it's going to still predict 50. And then even when I needed slightly more, that forecast sheet was never going to predict what they ended up ordering because it was so much greater than what they really needed. And the biggest root cause is just the lack of communication between the different groups in the supply chain. You really had no idea what was realistic. Was this a one-time spike? What was the reason, the driving factor for it? And so, we know that from one week to the next, they went from 50,000 to 100,000. And at that time, you know, that could have been a phone call to say, hey, they're not ordering 50 anymore, they're ordering 100. So, you know, double up one time and then kind of stay at that rate. But instead, my orders went from 50 to 100 up to 400,000 and then tanked after that. So, just not being able to communicate, not having any outside information to be able to plan for that. And then I didn't know, and with any advance notice, that the orders were then going to drop out. So I had then accumulated all that inventory and was just stuck sitting on that. So some preventative measures, um, again, just communication, knowing, talking to your vendors, your customers, suppliers, and getting that information ahead of time. A lot of times customers will have end of life programs and discussions and say, hey, we're going to keep ordering this many for this many weeks, and then we're not going to order anymore. So that lets you shut off the pipeline. Or when you go from 50 to 100, that's a phone call to say, hey, is this just a one-time thing, or is this the new normal? So that do I just need one extra order one time, or do I need to increase all my orders going forward? Um, just having those conversations and getting that information helps you better understand what the new forecast should be, instead of trying to do the math, because the math, when it sees from here to here to here, the next number is going to be 10 times greater than that. And then, just doing some research in general. I mean, we couldn't really do it with this game, but you can, just look at, I order parts from other countries and I have to get them imported. And so I'm always having to kind of look at in the news, look around, are there port strikes going on? Are there some regulations, changes happening? Are there new tariffs being added in? Um, or, just changes with the product itself. For this game, it was root beer. If you see some changes coming, like with health, and they're saying they're gonna not allow some ingredients anymore in products, and this product goes in root beer. Well, you would want to follow that closely to say, okay, at some point people may not be able to or want to buy it anymore. Will your demand be going away? So just, keeping up with, changes to your product, changes to regulations, um, any turmoil with any government, countries, weather, anything like that. But then another thing that would have helped is having some safety stock and some more firm lead times. Um, I experience where I work, we have a set lead time. And so if we have a 4-week lead time with a customer and they order 10 a week, and then after those, now they all of a sudden they need 20, well, they have to wait those 4 weeks to increase their order. They can't just say, oh, next week I want 20 instead of 10. And that kind of holds them to a lead time, and that gives me time to get the product I need to make it for them, instead of just letting them go from 10 to 20 and now I'm out of stock and I get charged for having no inventory. Having those, more firm lead times, longer lead times, that helps you plan further out. You can't always hold customers to too long of a lead time, but trying to align your supply and your customers' lead times so that they're closer together, so you don't have to worry so much about huge spikes because you have time to then react. So I think those sort of things would help prevent me where I accumulated, I think, 4 million or so in extra inventory that I didn't need. So that's it. Thank you.